Welcome to Classic 4x4, the podcast for and by classic four-wheel drive enthusiasts. I'm your host, Chris Piccone, and you can follow the podcast on Instagram and Facebook at classic4x4_trucks. Also, make sure you subscribe to the show on your podcast listening platform and check out our website at classic4x4.com. And make sure to reach out to us if we can help you sell your classic, custom, and modified truck or 4x4. Well, hello, Classic 4x4 podcast listeners. I'm your host, Chris Piccone, and I am absolutely elated for today's guest. We have an innovator in the collector vehicle marketplace space who I am just honored to be able to interview and talk with today. And as I've gotten to know him, I've also come to realize that him and I are also cut from the same piece of cloth. So everyone join me in welcoming Jonathan Shaw, president of Hemmings. What's going on, Jonathan?
Hey, Chris, it's awesome to be on the Classic 4x4 podcast. And, you and I just spent the last several minutes catching up. And as you mentioned, so much in common in our interests in the space. I'm a Classic 4x4 guy through and through. So I know it's going to be a lot of fun, talking about this and then just kind of our broader takes on just, the collector marketplace overall, the things we've got going on at Hemmings. This will be a lot of fun to record.
Oh, definitely, man. And first off, I want to congratulate you on, you have a couple, moments, or I should say a few different things that have happened recently. First off, Hemmings turned 70. Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, it's amazing to be at a brand that has 70 years of passion and history. And, the talks that I get to have with people at automotive events that tell me about their personal stories with Hemmings, their like family lineages that have had experience with the brand, and the affinity of that's really, really special. And, we're kind of continuing the same mission that Ernest Hemmings set out back in 1954 to kind of connect collector enthusiasts together and uplift and grow the hobby overall. And we're really kind of keeping that core, but we're doing it with this new bent on services and technology and a heavy focus on the marketplace business.
The other big milestone is you actually headed up, or I guess were the driver behind a really intuitive rebrand, which the brand needed, and everything's looking really good, man. Congrats.
Thank you. Yeah. Hemmings had long kind of stayed with the same, logos, the same look and feel kind of all the way through its print life, but hadn't really, kind of redeveloped itself, the brand logos, the brand statement, we're driven by drivers. We really went through this exercise last year. We found an amazing partner in a group called Eastern Adventure out of Maine, and really love some of the stuff that they did. They focus on affinity groups too, largely in kind of the outdoor and particularly the skiing space. And we really found like this incredible partner that got us from the get-go, that understood like, hobbies and enthusiasts, brands and marketplaces. And, we came away with something that's really special of kind of paying homage to our 70 years of history, but, gave us a branding and logos and a new look that, could carry us through the digital age as well.
That's awesome. And the other thing we're going to talk about too is, which I'm excited to talk about, is the fact that you have really evolved the Hemmings brand from, what was a very prominent media company that had a marketplace, where now it's really the only full service, frictionless collector marketplace out there as its primary business, but is supported by this robust media platform too.
That's exactly right. And we started as a marketplace. So, in 54, Ernest Hemmings found this need to collect Model A and Model T buyers. And at that time, those cars were, 25, 30 years old or older. And but there was no kind of intermediary helping these people at scale, get in touch with each other. So he created a 4-page pamphlet that was mailed to 100 Model A and Model T enthusiasts. And, it was really about buying and selling then. And then, through the course of Hemmings' life, particularly kind of in the early, 2000s, it really kind of changed, into a media company, because that's what, its ownership knew at the time. And print media was a great business to be in then. And, they built on Hemmings Classic Car magazine, Hemmings Muscle Machine magazine, onto Hemmings Motor News. And, you're exactly right. Hemmings was, kind of went through this transition of being, a media company that had a marketplace. And, we've been advantageous in redeveloping the marketplace as our kind of true North Star or core, business, and utilizing media to fuel the marketplace. That's kind of where we're at right now.
And I'm excited to talk about, dig a little bit deeper into that frictionless marketplace a little bit later in the podcast. But before we get into that, let's get to know you. I mean, you mentioned it earlier, which I'm excited about, is, yes, you're an enthusiast. Yes, you're a professional. But at the end of the day, you're a classic 4x4 enthusiast. Like, that's your core. You're building some. We're going to talk about a build, which I don't want to talk about yet. I don't want to divulge it to the listeners yet, because it's something super cool that we're going to talk about. But before we get into that, like, tell us about yourself. Like, how does a kid from Charlotte, develop this passion for collector vehicles, and eventually, what's your career progression to becoming the president of Hemmings?
Yeah, I always love talking about this. So I grew up around Hemmings. My grandfather, Ray, was a big American hot rod guy, and would read the Hemmings, and we would go out to like the Charlotte Auto Fair, 2 times a year when it was held here at the Speedway. And that was kind of my first taste of like, wow, this is a massive hobby. Like my, hanging out around my grandfather's cars. So learned how to drive on a all original 54 Chevy Bel Air, which was really cool. So Power Glide transmission was one of the first automatic transmissions, and, had the straight 6 Blue Flame engine. And so, no power steering, no power brakes, automatic transmission would help, learn, or make it a little easier to drive. But, driving that out around the country roads, because Charlotte was still pretty sleepy, at the time. It wasn't the big urban city that it is now. That was kind of my first foray into it, was just working on those cars. I'd go on, trips with him. I remember going down to, Southeast Georgia, looking at, a Chevy pickup. We ended up buying one a little closer to home, a 56 F100. And so, kind of growing up in it, through my grandfather. And there was one trip in particular that, is just such a core memory for me. One Saturday, I think I was about 13 years old, he grabs me and he says, "Hey, we're going to go up to Vermont, and we're going to see this really cool museum that's attached to Hemmings." And I'd obviously, seen his Hemmings magazines and flipped through them before, but thought it was such a cool opportunity. So, he goes in, he says, "Hey, I got to do a meeting real quick." I sit outside the office for this meeting. Little do I know at the time, he's negotiating to buy Hemmings inside that office while I'm sitting outside. And so, he's inside. And, we just tour around, see a bunch more cars. And a couple of weeks later, he goes, "Hey, you remember all those cars we saw in that really cool museum up in Vermont?" And I'm like, "Yeah, that was awesome." He said, well, ACBJ, the company he was running at the time, just bought Hemmings, which I just thought was so cool and so neat. And just, to be here now running this business and as the president and celebrating its 70th years, this wild full circle, life event for me, because that's certainly not what I thought I would end up doing. but have worked with, I've worked for American City Business Journals, which is, one of the largest producers of business media across the United States. Cut my background with them kind of early in my career after I graduated the University of Alabama, moved to New York, worked in their office in New York on M&A projects. And got my first exposure to what it's like to be in a hobby industry when I bought a company called Rowdy.com that was like a NASCAR social network. They were doing podcasts in 2010, video in 2010, which was really early. And so it was a lot of fun to be around that kind of environment and just experience the enthusiasm for this brand, tons of user-generated content and blogging. And I feel that at Hemmings. I feel this enthusiast brand and this collector car hobby love, which I think is why we all really enjoy working in this industry now.
That's awesome. So what was the like the first, vehicle, like whether it was a car or truck, that you remember driving in, that your grandfather or your parents were driving, where you kind of spawned that passion for vehicles? Yeah.
If I close my eyes, I can still picture it right now. It was my parents' 1980, I think it was in 83, might have been in 85, a Jeep Grand Wagoneer. So I remember, climbing myself up, at a couple years old into that, gold on the outside, wood paneling, red, burgundy corduroy interior on the inside. And, that is absolutely what's fueled my love of classic 4x4s, is that first memory of climbing into a full-size Jeep and you just think like, this thing's a monster truck, when you're only a couple feet tall, trying to pull yourself up into it, and just have always had a love of Jeeps and classic 4x4s kind of since that time began. Like, I love my grandfather's, classic hot rods. He's got we still have the 54 Bel Air, a 32 Deuce Coupe, a 56 F100 that the family all has now since he's passed, and enjoy working on those. But like, my love is classic 4x4s.
That's awesome. So all of our listeners are waiting here embedded, because there's a question I ask every single guest on the Classic 4x4 podcast, which is, what was your first car or truck? Like, when you got your driver's license, what was that one that you drove to high school the day you got your driver's license that like gave your unabetted freedom to the world?
Yeah, it would definitely be my 1997 Jeep TJ.
Awesome.
It was manual 5-speed, inline 6. It had on it what it was called at the time, like the Land Runner package. So it had this really unique fiberglass body on it, almost, was this like Hummer-esque look to it, and that was like, wow, that really opened my eyes to the world of aftermarket accessories. As you know, the Jeep world is just flooded with tons of options.
Insane.
And I remember just sitting there at night, like writing out, like, what is my perfect build of this Jeep, and doing all this research. And, I was fortunate. My dad was super into it with me. And so we built this incredible Jeep, had this TerraFlex lift on it, had a Super 35 floater kit from Warren, roof rack, lights, winch, tons of mods on it over the years that I owned it. But the experience of top off, doors off, manual transmission driving that 97 TJ was like, I yearn for that again. I love the feeling of freedom of that. And as in high school, it doesn't get better than that.
Oh, definitely not. I mean, all of our listeners know that my first car was a 95 YJ, and it was this like weird teal color. And I forget that, but I got to tell you, like, when it came time to drive down the Garden State Parkway from where I lived in northern New Jersey to head to like a buddy's beach house, and we ripped the top off of it. Trust me, nobody was interested in driving in my buddy's minivan. Everybody wanted to hop in the Wrangler. And those were the best days of my life, whether either that or we were jamming, four pairs of skis into a Wrangler and heading up to the mountains to ski for the weekend. I mean, it just, the memories are amazing. So that's cool, man. Definitely cut from the same piece of cloth when it comes to that. But I want to talk about a build real quick. I'm excited to talk about Hemmings, all the cool stuff that's happening, but I want to talk about a build because all of our listeners know I have been hot on modern classics for a while. The OBS Fords, the second gen, the later gen, late 80s, early 90s, square bodies. Yeah. I bought one myself. I have a 1990 K5, which I have down here in Charleston for the winter. I'm driving it on a daily basis. Absolutely love it. But just tell our listeners, and again, I'm so excited to talk about this. You're building a project right now. Yeah. What is it?
Yeah, I'm totally geeked out to talk about it. So
me too, man.
Building a 1976 K5 Blazer right now, and it's actually in paint right now. I shared those pictures with you of the truck, and it's new gold and white, two-tone trim with the white coves. And what's really unique about this truck is, I call it a presto mod. So it's part preservation, part, resto mod at the same time. And it's been in development for, almost 3 years now from when I bought the truck 3 years ago. Bought it from an awesome friend of mine in Vermont, in Bennington, where Hemmings is headquartered. Walked into his shop, guy named Glenn Sauer, they call him Vermont Glenn. And he's kind of a C10 Chevy truck master, an incredible metal fabricator. And when I saw the truck, I was like, oh no. One of those feelings that you get.
I have to have it.
I have to have this, and this is going to get me in some trouble. And Glenn had, kind of this vision for the truck. But he wanted to invest in his business and do some other things with his shops. And it was just kind of the right place at the right time, hit the desire button for me. So acquired the truck from Glenn, and then we really went out planning this build. And the preservation piece of this is, in that we were able to source NOS doors for it that had never been used. We're literally still wrapped in the cardboard from GM from 76. Wow. A tailgate that had never been used, so another NOS piece. This will have the nicest body of any square body in existence when we're finished in the next couple of months. And then, to make it unique, I started going down this rabbit hole of vintage Baja racing. And there was a company at the time in the 70s and 80s called Vic Hickey Racing, and found a lot of parts from the Vic Hickey era to put on the truck. So it's going to have an original Vic Hickey brush guard on it. It's got these things called sidewinder steps that when you put on your foot on it, it pops down so you can get up into the truck. And it's got, axle trusses and various things. And so that's between the body and these Vic Hickey parts, that's the preservation piece. But where it gets into the resto mod,
the powertrain, isn't it? Now you're going to tell me about the powertrain. Let's hear it.
Yeah. So we originally sourced an LQ9 from I think it was a 2003 Cadillac Escalade, and rebuilt the motor. But when it was on its second dyno pull, and it just sounded so good, it's choppy and had this awesome Edelbrock cam in it. The motor blew up on the dyno. And it was oh God, where are we going to go from here? That set the project back a bit, and my wallet back a bit at the same time. And so what I decided to do was put an LS 364 in it. So sourced a brand new engine from GM Performance. It's got a 4L75E transmission in it. So all modern driveline, new drive shafts. The axles have been completely rebuilt. And as you know, those axles between the front and rear on width are not the same. So we expanded the rear axle so it is the same width as the front. It's going to ride on 34-inch BF Goodwrench all-terrains, have a really great stance, in the 4x4 world, getting the stance just right is where it's got to be. So it's got Detroit Springs, Bilstein shocks, on these 34s, give it the right edge to the build. So it's something. I'm tickled that we're coming in the final months of reassembly right now.
You should be pumped, man. Those pictures you sent me of it in the paint booth. Whoever you have doing the body work that is just second to none. It was, when you sent me those pictures, I couldn't believe it. I was like, wow. Right.
Yeah.
So, but I'm excited to see this thing get done and on the road, and most importantly, you enjoying it, you and your family enjoying it. That's why we do it, is so we can enjoy them. Right.
That's right. And the project has a fun name. It's called Project Offline. Like you, I spend so much of my time behind a computer on my phone, connected to everything. Like, I wanted to build this as a moment to turn off, disconnect. When I get in the car, it's just about the driving experience. It's about the time with my boys in the car and my wife and my daughter, and just really enjoying the whole purpose of the drive, putting a smile on my face, and kind of putting work can be stressful and life can be stressful. And so finding that unique moment through this Blazer is going to be really nice.
That's what it's all about. Just, literally walking into your garage and that smile on your face every single time. Right.
That's right.
Let's talk about Hemmings, man. You've done, you took over Hemmings as the president in 2020 and you've brought it just evolved it decades in 4 years, right? Absolutely decades. I mean this with the absolute utmost respect, is when you took over Hemmings, it was a media company that kind of had a marketplace, and don't get me wrong, a very successful media company, because, and correct me if I'm wrong, I heard this stat recently, Hemmings Motor News still has, the traditional, print media still has 300,000 subscribers. Is that true?
Yeah, that's true.
That's wild, man. That is
yeah.
Put that into perspective for our listeners. That's in this day and age for traditional media, 300,000 subscribers is massive for any publication, let alone an enthusiast focused publication.
Yeah, it still garners massive scale, and we've added on and evolved the digital component. We'll have over 1.3 million people visit the site every single week. And so we've built, this new digital business component to the print product, which has been incredibly strong, remains incredibly strong. One of my favorite stats is, we're the #1 automotive title on Barnes and Noble bookshelves. When you look at total monthlies, we're competing against our parent company at GQ and Vanity Fair and others for being one of the largest monthly sellers of monthly magazines as well. So it's pretty cool that, the group that's right in front of us is National Geographic. You're we're doing something right in the print product here too.
That puts into perspective right there the fact that, Hemmings Motor News has comparable circulation to National Geographic and GQ, which is, that's wild, man. So it's amazing that you guys have been able to keep that up. But, you have, one of your biggest initiatives was really in how you really brought the brand up to date and brought marketplaces to the forefront, was adding full service products. The class, you always had the classified, right? But the make offer and the auction product. And I can talk about some of these products, with conviction, because I use them when I represent the sale of my client. I advise and represent the sale of my clients' collector trucks at Classic 4x4. And I love the make offer product, by the way.
Thank you.
Which I'd love you to talk about that, because I use that pretty much exclusively, because it's a great product. But kind of talk to us how you had the classified product, you introduced the auction product, and then the make offer. How did that evolution happen? between those three products?
Yeah, so we saw, the rise of like the online e-commerce, like the facilitating of the sale piece, whereas before, we had the print classifieds. And there's a fun stat, even last month, we still had almost 5,000 print classifieds run in the Hemmings Motor News book. So it's still like a great product. But what we saw was, with the rise of eBay and others, we started to see, the rise of the online auction piece coming into focus. And there was a group of people who wanted to transact, through an online auction piece. So we studied the buy side of buying an existing platform and ultimately settled on the build side. So in 2019, I started consulting with Hemmings on the build side of the online auction. We launched that in 2019. Its first full year of existence was in 2020, and we've seen great growth with that. But you mentioned the Make Offer Marketplace, and what's really unique about the Make Offer Marketplace is it's this kind of middle ground between an auction. So you get the advantageous digital marketing and the advantageous digital interaction with buyers and sellers with Make Offer, but there's groups of people who they want to not be in this like pressure situation with an auction. And so we struck this middle ground where, the buyer or the seller gets to set the price point. They, craft their listing in conjunction with us. On our side, we're verifying that, it's a clean title. We've got a track of, verified ownership for the vehicle. And then on the buy side, we're verifying the buyers. We're making, they had to have a credit card on file to interact with the system. And so, it's kind of this bringing together of these two worlds between, the digital functions of an auction with the functions of, a traditional classified in this kind of perfect world in Make Offer. And that product for us, we launched it in 2022, had a couple months experience with it through 22. 23 was his first full year, and it exploded. It's just the activity on the Make Offer product has been phenomenal for us. And we now run three distinct marketplaces. We run the classified piece, the Make Offer piece, and the live online auctions as well.
Yeah, and I'm a big fan of the Make Offer. It's a great product, and I can talk about it with conviction because I use it for my clients. And I'm sure you've looked at my classic 4x4 account and can see I was one of the early adopters of the Make Offer product because, like you said, I mean, you cater to both those audiences. You have the best of the classified, the best of the auction, and you kind of put it together. So that's awesome.
And I know there's a pretty sweet 1982 Jeep J10 sitting in Make Offer right now.
Oh, there is. There is definitely an 82 Jeep J10 that's actually out of my own personal collection. That is not a client vehicle. That was me just needing room in my warehouse because I have a build that I haven't divulged yet that's going to be coming in sooner than later. So when I get back up to New Jersey, I'm down in Charleston for the winter, but when I get back up to New Jersey, I got to get serious about moving that thing along and accepting. I actually recently got a good offer. I just sadly I'm not up there right now. I'll be back up in a couple of weeks, and that gentleman is ready to pull the trigger as soon as I'm back up and I can get it on the truck. So got to get serious about moving that thing on. So you've built out this amazing full service, marketplace for collector vehicles. But recently you've introduced the Frictionless marketplace, and you've really elevated not only to be a full service marketplace that has that backing of that media platform, but now you've created this frictionless marketplace so that buyers and sellers can not only come together, but all the ancillary pieces, you can service them too. The transportation, insurance, valuation, payment, title. Talk to me about that, because this is what I'm really interested. You're the only one out there that is doing this right now.
Yeah. So really cool evolution, to the business and build onto this. continued growth and focus on the product set in the marketplace was, okay, we're connecting buyers and sellers, but what more can we do, to make the ease of entry or exit, to the point where, as you mentioned, it's essentially frictionless. And this came about in my first couple months with Hemmings. I was commuting a lot to Vermont and sitting with our customer service group and listening outside my door of, all the calls that would come in, and people asking us all kinds of questions about who's your recommended shipper, who do you think, offers the best insurance product, down to the one that we, when we started documenting and kind of categorizing all these calls, the ones that we were getting most often is this person legitimate and the car's legitimate? And how do I wire this person money safely? And that was like the impetus of this kind of 2-year journey to figure out how do we build a payment and title service for the collector car industry. And in the last month, we successfully launched Hemmings Pay and Title, which does just that. So, we're verifying both the buyer and the seller. We are verifying the title of the vehicle and its ownership records. We're providing a secure environment for either an ACH or wire transfer directly with the banks. And we're handling all the paperwork too. So all the things that, a new car dealer takes care of for you, so you don't have to mess with. People don't realize, when you're doing a peer-to-peer transaction, you got to do a title transfer. You got to generate a bill of sale. You've got to, we do a temporary registration as well as a 30-day temporary plate. So a lot of times when it rolls off the shipper and you've got to go to your state DMV to get your car registered, you're actually illegally driving the vehicle during that time period that you have it. And I think I'm not alone. I'm sure you're the same. When it rolls off the shipper, I want to get behind the wheel. I'm going on a drive.
Definitely.
And so you get that 30-day plate now, and it gives you some playtime window that you can go enjoy that. And this is a first of its kind product in this. The pay and title service is awesome. I think in the last month or two, we've sold 300 plus vehicles through Hemmings. I think over 60 plus people have utilized pay and title already. And so, that is validation that this is a service that people want. And part of this too, I'll give a little of my own background. Like, I love to go hunting, but it's not something I grew up doing. And so, I had to, come in as a new entrant into the space and, hire guides and everything to teach me. It's not something I intrinsically had. And I kind of took that experience of like learning and finding guides and built that into this frictionless marketplace product. Like, how do we take all of the new millennial and Gen Z buyers that are flooding into the collector car space who may not have grown up, like I did with, a grandfather and a dad who were interested in were transacting in a space, and really help them be the guide, give them services in this digitally enabled way that they're used to using. I liken this thing to this is the Amazon Prime of collector car buying. Like, we're really trying to take care of every step of fulfillment of the car, from, the pricing point where we give a personalized valuation through Hemmings Valuations, to pay and title. The marketplace is obviously how you find your vehicle, pay and title, how you do the transaction, the Hemmings insurance marketplace, and the Hemmings shipping product. Like, how do we take this from, I'm kind of interested at the outset and I want to browse and look, or you might wind up on, a C3 Corvette buyer's guide all the way through to like that C3 showing up on your doorstep. And it's been incredibly easy. Because one of the other things that I see happening, particularly amongst like the younger buyers, it's an experiential buy. I think like there's less kind of buy to collect and hold. And so you're going to go a season with your K5 Blazer. And then you might say like 2 years later, you're like, all right, I want to do a muscle car. And 2 years later, you're like, all right, I'm now into like British sports cars and I want to check that scene out. And so I think you're going to see like this rise of a lot more like transactions of the vehicles themselves, as opposed to like what was like the buy and hold model that existed previously.
Oh, no question. I agree with you. You know, there are collectors, and if anybody's like myself, I have the attention span of a 12-year-old. So like my warehouse where my collection is like my big toy box, right? So it's like I'm like a big little kid where, you know, I play with it. I love it so much. And then it goes in the corner and I stop using it and I feel bad because like I want somebody else to love it, and then end up just kind of moving it on down the line to the next caretaker. Because that's all we all really are, is we're caretakers.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. You know? So, I mean, it's amazing. You guys are the only ones out there. You know, there's some great auction platforms. There's some great, you know, classified platforms. But what's amazing is you guys have conquered and done a very good job executing and evolving to be that, you know, full service, frictionless collector vehicle marketplace. And you're the only ones out there doing it where you can handle every aspect of that pipeline, which is really awesome. And something I use myself for my own collection and my clients' vehicles too when I represent them. So we still have a little bit more time, and I want to riff about the markets, because if there's anything our listeners know, it's, you know, that I love talking about the markets. I'm very market driven. I'm a student of the markets. I sit in front of 4 screens all day long, watching these transactions click off and researching valuations for my clients and finding opportunities, stuff like that. So let's start that conversation off. Is like, you know, you've evolved, you know, well past anyone in the marketplace space right now, right? Hands down, no question.
Thank you.
What do you see the future being, right? You know, obviously this isn't the end. It's never the end. You're always going to pivot. You're always going to evolve. Like, so what's next?
Oh gosh. You know, kind of as I mentioned, you know, I think you're going to see, you know, more transactions happen. I think you're going to continue to see, you know, right now, you know, a year ago, 90% of collector car transactions occurred in what's called like the private gray market.
The gray market,
where, you know, the buyer and seller aren't, you know, out on display essentially, you know, through an auction house or something like that. It's still, you find a car, you know, parked down the street at your neighbor's house, or, you know, the Hemmings classified is obviously a huge, you know, propagator of the gray market. I think you're going to continue to see more and more e-commerce transaction growth in the marketplace space, whether it be through, you know, online auctions or make offer products. You know, those have you know, certainly grew a tremendous amount through COVID because, you know, you had to essentially buy your car that way if you wanted one. And I don't think that's going back anytime soon. But you're also starting to see like the graying line between like live auctions and online auctions. You know, you can watch a live stream of a live auction, you know, through Mika Mabreo Jackson, but you can be on your computer placing a bid at the same time. And so I think, you know, you're going to see this blurred line between like live events and online kind of converging together in one place. I was really interested to see, you know, a couple of years ago, Bonhams tried this hybrid mix too, where the cars were available to see in person at like the Greenwich Concours, but all the bids were taken online or, you know, through your phone. Again, I think you're going to see more of these kind of event type pieces where you can go and see the cars in person, but all the bidding activity might happen online. I think we're going to see more rise in that. So, you know, this coming weekend, we're actually doing the Car Corral at the Grand National Roadster Show. It's the Hemmings.com Car Corral.
Super cool.
So, like, the cars are there physically in person, but they're all in the make offer marketplace. So you're making your offers and you're doing your negotiating and buying, you know, while you're at the event or through the worldwide audience, you know, in real time, like on your phone, which is kind of this unique blend of like, you can come and see it in person. It's real. You know, you want to put your eyes on the car and look through it yourself. You can, but the, you know, all the buying aspect is handled online, and then we're fulfilling all that buying with our frictionless marketplace.
I definitely agree. It's like every market, you know, you have a reversion back to the mean, and, you know, back to the Amazon example, you know, Amazon was purely e-com and then acquired Whole Foods and then started building out their Prime stores. You have that reversion back to the mean. And I agree. I do anticipate seeing that reversion back to the mean. So let's talk about the markets. I just my first episode of the fourth season. You're actually going to be the second episode. Was all about my 2023 market update and 2024 market outlook. For all of our listeners out there that didn't listen to it, I highly recommend, because 2023 was a very interesting year. We came off of about 5 years of a bull market in the collector vehicle market across the board. And 2023 was not only volatile, but we saw all of the core, the three key metrics, sell through, dollar volume, and average sale price regress month over month, year over year in 2023. So it was a pretty choppy and a tough year. Though I will say collector trucks were the shining star in that difficult and volatile year. But the early indicators into 2024, and I am super excited to see I can't wait till I can dig into the January data, because we are seeing, just like we whipsawed, after a 5-year bull market, we kind of whipsawed to the other way, and we pulled back real heavy in 2023. We're starting to see that whipsaw happen the other way in 2024. So the early indicators is that 2024 is going to be not only a much better year than 2023, but we're already seeing the numbers come to fruition. There's some inefficiencies out there. We talked about actually earlier, first gen Broncos are an inefficiency. The market's flooded. They're getting soft, where on the flip side, second gen Broncos are absolutely on fire, doing crazy 6-figure numbers this week at Barrett Jackson out in Westworld. So it's like there are some inefficiencies out there in the market, but I am very optimistic, and I like the direction 2024 is going in for the collector vehicle markets, especially the truck markets. What's your view and your thoughts there?
Yeah, so I went through and pulled, some of our internal data this morning, and from a marketplace, perspective overall, not just the classic 4x4 space, but overall, you nailed it on the head. You see this massive run up in average sale price from 2019, through 22, 23. You start to see it pull back, and so we were trying to figure out in our own marketplace, where should we be without the COVID surge of pricing that occurred. And I think right now, where after the come down in 23 in average price, you're kind of right where you would be. If you said, okay, minus COVID surge, 2019 prices, the average couple percent increase year over year, now you're kind of level set again. But the outlier and the special place is classic 4x4s. This space is hot. And it what we see in the second gen Broncos in 2019, the average selling price was $26,000. Right now, the average selling price is $45,000. And that includes both the way high end of the market and the bottom end of the market of project vehicles. And so, that's a huge run up in average value for second gen Broncos. And if I might digress for a second, the second gen Bronco is it pains me that it was basically you had a tail end of 78 and 79 was the only year, and then they went away from it completely. It's Ford, you totally missed that.
Oh man, but they were throwaway trucks for the longest time. Nobody wanted them, which is, people weren't buying them at that point. They had the oil embargo, and it wasn't a seller for them, but man, what did the one do? There were a couple at Barrett Jackson that did good 6-figure numbers.
Yeah. And then you've seen crazy explosion in first gen Blazers, first gen Jemmys. So the 70, 72, model years, for the last 3 years running, I think Barrett Jackson has sold a 72 K5 for $440,000. I mean, that's just insane, money for those trucks. It gets pretty interesting, as when you get into those conversations and you're trying to help people price values for their trucks at that point, everybody wants to point to these outliers, and you got to pull them back to reality. This is not a one-of-one bespoke resto mod. You've got to with an LS3 and, all these combinations, you got to pull it back down a little bit. But I think, I'm really bullish. 78 Wagoneers. You can still get in them for, mid 30s. There was a Cherokee Chief that was at SEMA Battle of the Builders that won an award. That was amazing. The gold one, you're $26,000 to $29,000 there. There's some really great price point entry points for these trucks still. And I think your upside is like, year one, you're appreciating in value still in the classic 4x4 space. And you're not seeing that in many other markets or categories across the collector spectrum.
I agree. I mean, and I've talked about this a lot till I'm, just blue in the face. I'm real hot on modern classics right now. The OBS Fords, have priced in a little bit of the market right now. But if there's any true indication to where there's a ton of value there, I think it's you and I, which are hands down the fact that we're both, we both have second gen K5s in our collections, right? So you have two experts in the space that have recently acquired second gen K5s in their collection. If that doesn't tell you that there is opportunity there, I don't know what does, right?
Yes, absolutely. Pat ourselves on the back a little bit there.
Exactly. Sure. I mean, you're in the early part of the second gen. I'm in the later part of the second gen, but which is amazing. The second gen ran from 76 to 91.
Yeah. So I've got a round eye. They call it round eye square body with the round headlights, and you've got the square eye.
Yep, the square eye. But hey, it's got air conditioning, it's got an automatic transmission, it's got the creature comforts, and that's just what makes my wife happy. That's all that matters, because when I want to take a truck out to dinner or whatever, all she cares about is just being comfortable and not having the top down so it doesn't mess up her hair, and she needs air conditioning.
But what's so cool about those too is like the body style largely just didn't change. Like they hit it out of the park with the square. And as you said, ran 20 plus years. Like it was obviously very desirable truck. And I was fortunate to get mine a couple years ago as they continue to appreciate in value. You can still get them. Like we sold a 1978 GMC Jimmy 2 weeks ago that I think was, just under $30,000, but, had a fresh repaint. The body was great. Had a rebuilt, original 350 in it, manual trans, really nice interior. To get all those things, sub, roughly $28,000, like there's still great entry points in the classic 4x space.
And if I had a crystal ball, I would tell you that truck this time next year is a $40,000 to $50,000 truck.
I think
the market continues.
I have to be honest. I almost bought it myself, just to do a little, like maybe we could find a takeout motor or something in it to get it a little more modern drivetrain, and like that's an immediate flipper for positive cash.
That's cool. That's awesome. And let's, I think we're on the same page with the markets. 2024 is going to be a great year. And on my list of what's hot in 2024 is the modern classics. We just talked about that. But another one that I like talking about because I'm infatuated with is the Land Cruisers, right? The FJs. And they had a bumpy road before, the market started to regress in 2023. And the market got actually, ironically, very similar to the first gen Bronco market. The FJ market got flooded by with inventory predominantly from importers, and the supply outstripped the demand. So they actually started to regress in like 2021, 2022. As the market was progressing, they started to regress. And, we saw a bottom, I'd say 8 months to a year ago, where you could get these things in like the mid 20s. Those days are over. That market is bottomed and they are running back up. Are they the $80,000 to $100,000 that they were in 2020, 2021? No. But they're also not the $20,000 to $30,000 that they were a year ago. They're sitting in the mid 30s to even the low 50s these days. But I still like the FJs. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, it's interesting. We've seen strong FJ prices come in, even in like the last couple months of 23 and here in the very beginning of 24. The FJ market is coming back. For sure. There were really nice cars, in the $40,000 price point with nice restorations that, were hard to move last year that are, we're selling pretty much every one that comes up through make, offer, and auction right now. So you're starting to see the FJ market come back in a big way, and kind of talking about like where that market has been. You're exactly right. Flooded with inventory at one period of time. And I think that, that's kind of the come off of like, when Jonathan Ward and Jamie Ward came out with the Icon, brand and really cut their teeth in FJs before they got into the Broncos. Like that's where everybody started to realize, oh, wait, like you can take this platform and do that. Like, I think that's where that market started to take off. And then you started to get into these, these massive, really expensive, FJs. That market has come back. And I think it's kind of priced right now, in my opinion. Good time to buy. Not a risky buy. You're not taking a flyer. It's an established market with an established clientele. But it's come off those like massive run-ups where, those really high-end resto mods kind of ramp the price.
Yeah, no, I agree. And we're actually going to have an investment quality FJ builder on in the future here on the Classic 4x4 podcast in a future episode. So get to talk a little bit more about that. But Jonathan, I can't thank you enough for joining us today on the Classic 4x4 podcast. It's an absolute pleasure to become acquainted with you and pick your brain, and absolutely love what you're doing at Hemmings, and keep up the great work.
Thank you so much, Chris. It's awesome to be on the Classic 4x4 podcast with you. Had just a wonderful time. I was circling this one for a long time just because of our shared interests, and knew it would be a fun convo, and it certainly has been. And when my 76 is done, I'm going to bring it down to Charleston. We'll cruise around town for a little bit.
I'm looking forward to it, man.
Thanks a lot, Chris.
All right. Have a great day.
You too.